Welcome back. If you haven't been here before, welcome. If you haven't been here before, I'll just tell you really quickly what my channel is about in case you're interested and you want to stick around. I'm here trying to learn, make, do, find a path for the crafting that I do that is sort of all over the place. And I say all over the place because it is all over the place. I'd like to kind of hone in on something that I can do that's easy, that's fast, that's fun, and that I could possibly turn into a side gig, make productive, and maybe even bring in a little bit of revenue. I am a mom first and foremost, so anything that I do has to fall in line with my family. So that's a huge part of it. They're here a lot. You'll probably see somebody pop in 2, 3, 4, maybe 8 times. Probably only 6 because 2 of the kids have moved out. I only have 6 at home. So maybe only 6, but maybe a husband or a neighbor or something will pop in. Anyway, this is Plan C, Leotard video. A couple of weeks ago, I started by making a leotard for my youngest daughter. It was okay. There were a few things that I needed to learn. Next step was to make a Leo for my oldest daughter. It was fine, other than it didn't quite fit her correctly. And I think a lot of that has to do with the pattern that I did use. When I looked at it, it kind of had a funny shape in the bottom, and she said the exact same thing. I sent her a picture before I actually sent the leotard, and she said, "Mom, when the rear end looks like that, it's generally not going to sit correctly." And it didn't. You can wear it. It's cute. It's done well. I did a lot better of a job on number 2 than I did on number 1, so that's a plus. So on number 3, what I'm going to do is take what I've learned from the pattern that I had, look at a new pattern that I got, besides the fact that I've cut up quite a few leotards that I had around here to just kind of see what different shapes I kind of prefer as far as dance goes. A lot of leotards might look functional, but there are different I don't know, let's say challenges with what you're doing and how you wear them, and if you're partnering, which ones you can wear, and which ones are going to stay up better. What Leos do you feel like you never have to wear your tights over because they're perfectly comfortable? Things like that. Now, the last the last leotard video that I did make, I said I sounded a little bit salty in the description, and that it was probably just because I needed a taco, and I think that it really was because I wasn't salty. My voice kind of sounded salty, and I sounded a little grumpy, but I really wasn't grumpy. So what I'm going to do today first is I'm going to go eat a taco, or 2 tacos, probably 2 tacos. Then I'm going to try to make a pattern, and then I'm going to make some Leos. So if that sounds something like you would be interested in, stick around. And if you're interested in the channel, just hit subscribe so that every time I do something, you get a notification. And you tell me what kinds of things that I'm doing that you like, and what kinds of things aren't exactly very helpful to you, because that's helpful to me. All right, let's go. Much needed break in the day here at my favorite authentic Mexican restaurant. Did you know that that Coke in that bottle right there, it is manufactured in Mexico, and it has no corn syrup? Yes, no corn syrup, so I can drink it without losing my ever-loving mind. It's made with actual, real sugar. Imagine that, sugar. So before I cut anything on this day, I thought food was a very, very good idea since, the last little incident with my voice. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the whole leotard production thing. Oh, but wait, phone call. So oldest daughter called while I happened to be starting this, and I decided that she could help me make the decision about which fabric we were going to use this day. Now this fabric, the little sunflower fabric, is the one that she said she wanted, and then when I showed it to her on this day, she was like, yeah, no, I really don't think that I want that. So I started pulling them out one by one, and of course they weren't anything that she thought that I should make, which I was making it for her little sister anyway. But she had ideas and wanted to share, which I loved. So I pulled out the one that I thought was a little bit hokey and she wouldn't want to have anything to do with because it was this like Dorothy gingham. She's about ready to start a production of The Wizard of Oz, a ballet with New York State Ballet next month for The Wizard of Oz. So I wasn't sure she'd really like that one, but hey, that's the one she wanted. So that's the one we went with. And I decided I would make two. So let's talk a little bit about how this adventure got started. My husband, he's really rooting for me to make and keep making these. For the first time ever, I worked with stretch in a tutu. I made a tutu with a stretch bodice. Actually made two of those in November. And thought, well, why not make a leotard? Because he'd been saying, hey, you should really try and make leotards. So I said, okay, well, let's do that. So that's where it started. So I looked at fabrics, I watched some tutorials, and I learned a lot about it. Not as much, though, as when I decided to just leap off of the leotard sidelines here and try to make my first one. So if you've seen my first two leotard videos, and I'll link to those in the comments and in the description for you. Do you like my little light box there? It's actually Christmas lights in a clear plastic box that I can use as a tracing board. Anyway, if you liked or didn't see either of my first two videos but would like to, I will link to them in the comments as well as the description. If you haven't, you go ahead and do that if you want. If not, and you've seen them, you know that I learned what I like and what I don't about the process and all of its components. And I'll list those. The ones that I can think of off the top of my head. Stretch thread. Stretch thread, I love it in the serger. I absolutely hate it in the sewing machine. I tried tips and tricks and tried to figure out exactly how to do that the right way. But I sort of just couldn't get it to work in my machine, which brings me to stretch needles. They're said to be a must in the process, so of course I bought them. I tried them. I still don't think that it helped very much in the process. Thread nets, I love them. Nifty little idea. You put them on your stretch thread so it doesn't keep falling off of the spool while you're sewing. A couple of other things. The binding is okay. Sometimes I think it's necessary in the neck. Sometimes I think you can just fold over the hem. So you do you. Elastic absolutely has to go in the leg holes, but if you feel it's better to do just the binding or the binding and elastic in the armholes, or just fold it over and use elastic, or just fold it over, that's really up to you. I also learned it really isn't that hard. I learned that I need to find or make a perfect pattern. So as you can see here, that's what I'm trying to do. I traced a pattern and then I compared it to another pattern, the one that we didn't like the bottom on that I used the last time. I made the bottom a little less wavy on this one after I sort of traced this out and then made my own adjustments there. You can see me doing that. And I also learned in this process that something that I already knew, but I have to remind myself of constantly, that I learn best from doing. So that's what I really need to stick with. If I want to do something, watch, and then just jump off and do it. So maybe this video will help you kind of in that way. You can watch it, see if it's something that you'd like to do or try or learn more about before you watch a whole bunch of tutorials. Someone just dropped off a pair of ballet shoes to me, so that's about to interrupt the day again. Emergency sewing. A mom who got these ballet shoes in for a class that was the very next day, and she didn't quite know how to sew them together. Now, I'm going to just outwardly call her out on that because her daughter did take dance lessons for like 13 years or something. Something like that, and she never sewed a pair of dance shoes. No, she didn't. Her mom did. I'm certain of that because her mom's actually a very accomplished seamstress. Okay, so here we are packing up on day one so I can go home and sew those shoes, and we'll come back in a couple of days. A couple of days. Okay, so got those shoes sewn up, and a couple of days later, Pepper and I are back at it. Now, this leotard, I decided needed a front lining for sure, so I put
put in an entire white panel of 4-way white stretch in the front of each of these leotards, and I pinned that up, but then I did sew that together before I sewed the whole thing together, because I just feel like attaching that first for me helps me to keep it straight when I'm putting the whole thing together. Stretch thread, as I mentioned before, changing the serger here to stretch thread. Now the serger is where I really, really love the stretch thread. It works like a charm in the serger. I never have a problem with breakage in the serger with the stretch thread like I do in the sewing machine. Little chocolate break, and then back to threading the serger, which is sometimes necessary because the serger can be a little bit contrary. So keeping chocolate around is always a good plan. Now, I am not generally a pinner. I don't pin and pin and pin and pin and pin, but I discovered the last 2 leotards that I do need to be a little bit more careful with my pinning, and so I use them. I use lots and lots of pins, just like on the last 2, shoulders first, then the crotch, up the sides. Very, very simple, because this little guy doesn't even have any sleeves, so it's going to be an easy one. Back to the serger to put those pieces all together. And then to the machine, where I'm not using a stretch thread. Looks like I coughed there, but I really didn't. I don't even know why that looks like that. Cute little double needle top stitch. Looks great. Looks great up there with binding around the neck. Did decide to do it there. So then, you know what? I decided to put the binding on the sleeves as well. Now, I will tell you that in the end, I did not particularly like the look of the binding in the sleeves on this. The one that I did make for my older daughter, I'm going to, I think, cut that out and just put elastic in, because I did binding with elastic in it. Again, pinning is important here in this for me, more so than it is in other projects, which kind of surprised me as much as I headed for the pins and headed for the pins and headed for the pins. But once I got the binding pinned on and the elastic in, then the elastic, of course, goes in those leg holes to make them sit nicely and not ride up, because it is dancewear after all. But in that binding, I did stick with it in the smaller one. I think it was kind of cute, but it looked a little bit juvenile, I do believe, in the older leotard. And you'll see what I did here in the end. I added a little cutesy Dorothy Gale addition to the shoulders, and you'll see how we did that in a minute. Back to the machine, make those loops for the other set of legs, so that I could then again pin and pin and pin and pin and pin, and then pin a little bit more with that elastic, which of course is important because you have to equally disperse that in the front and in the back so that you don't have it really tight on one side and not on the other. In the first one, I did hold my elastic just thinking that I was going to tension it properly, and of course I didn't tension it exactly right. It worked, it was fine, but it just wasn't as smooth and perfectly consistent as it is if you do make the loops first and then pin them in quarters, in sections, onto your leg holes here. There it is. Got to pin that binding around that elastic. Roll that over and pin it, and pin it, and pin it, and pin it. A couple more pins. Double needle top stitch. And there you have it. Dorothy and Toto. She wanted that picture, of course. And her cute little leotard that you can see I put the little bows at the shoulder. So there you have it. Dorothy inspired, Wizard of Oz inspired, leotard. Made 2, but we only got a picture of the cutie little girl that's here at home. It was fun. And it does get easier every time. So I encourage you, if you've thought about trying to make your own leotard, do it. Absolutely do it. And if you're a learner like me who learns from trying, then try and try again.